Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Have you ever seen someone so confident in their power that they forget the world doesn't revolve around them? Well, today's story is exactly about that. A courtroom, a powerful judge, a desperate man, and one phone call that changed everything in a way no one saw coming. It was a cold Monday morning and the courthouse was already packed. People whispered nervously as they waited for their cases to be called. The air smelled of tension and old paperwork. And at the center of it all sat Judge Raymond Hawley. A man known for his sharp tongue and even sharper ego. Wasn't just respected, he was feared. Lawyers avoided crossing him, defendants dreaded standing in front of him, and even seasoned prosecutors chose their words carefully around him. Because Judge Hawley had one belief burned into his mind: authority was absolute, and he was the authority of it. Morning, the bailiff called out the next case, case number 4821, the state versus Daniel Reyes. Murmurs spread across the room as a man in his early 30s stepped forward. Daniel looked exhausted. His clothes were clean, but worn. His eyes carried the weight of someone who hadn't slept in days. Wasn't a criminal, at least, not the kind people expect. Ted was a mechanic, a single father, and according to the charges in front of the court, he had committed fraud and theft from a high-profile client. Prosecution painted him as a liar, a manipulator, someone who had taken advantage of a wealthy businessman. But there was something about Daniel that didn't match the story. He stood there quietly, hands trembling slightly, but his gaze steady, like someone who knew something no one else did. Hawley leaned back in his chair, glancing over the file with clear disinterest. Mr. Reyes, he said in a bored tone, you are accused of defrauding Mr. Charles Winston of over $50,000. Do you understand the charges against you? Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, Your Honor. And how do you plead? There was a pause, just a second too long. Not guilty, Daniel replied. A few people in the room scoffed. Quietly, the prosecutor smirked, like he had already won. Judge Hale raised an eyebrow. Not guilty, he repeated, almost amused. Well, this should be interesting. The prosecutor stood confidently, presenting documents, statements, and what seemed like undeniable evidence: invoices, transactions, witness testimonies, all pointing toward Daniel's guilt. Every piece built a narrative that was hard to ignore. Yet Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He simply stood there, waiting. Finally, the judge turned to him. Well, Mr. Reyes, it seems the evidence is quite overwhelming. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Daniel took a deep breath, his voice calm but firm. Your Honor, I didn't steal anything. I was set up. The courtroom stirred. Again, Judge Hawley chuckled softly. Set up, of course. That's a classic defense. It's the truth, Daniel insisted, and I can prove it. The judge leaned forward slightly now, entertained. Oh, you can prove it, he said with a hint of mockery. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Daniel hesitated just for a moment. There's someone I need you to call. The entire room went quiet. Judge blinked, then let out a short laugh. Someone I need to call, he repeated. This isn't a game show, Mr. Reyes. You don't get to phone a friend. A few people chuckled, but Daniel didn't. Smile, please, Your Honor, he said quietly. If you call this person, everything will make sense. Judge Hawley shook his head, still amused. This is absurd. But something about Daniel's calm persistence made him pause. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was boredom. Either way, the judge leaned back, crossing his arms. Fine, he said with a smirk. Let's hear it. Call whoever you want. A ripple of whispers moved through the courtroom. Daniel swallowed, then spoke clearly. Call the number in my jacket pocket. It's written on a piece of paper. The bailiff retrieved the note and handed it to the judge. Hawley glanced at it briefly, raising an eyebrow. You expect me to personally call this number? Yes, Your Honor. Another Powsathan with a dismissive shrug. The judge picked up his phone. This better be worth my time, he muttered as he dialed the number. Through, held its breath. Phone rang on Sir3 times, and then someone answered. Hello. The voice on the other end was calm, deep, and unmistakably authoritative. Hale's expression shifted slightly, but he maintained his composure. This is Judge Raymond Hawley speaking. Who am I talking to? There was a brief silence. Feigned the voice. In that moment, everything changed. Judge Hale's face went pale. His posture stiffened. His confident demeanor cracked like glass under pressure. Sir, I didn't expect, he stammered. The entire courtroom for Zeno one had ever seen him like this. Not once. Arrogant judge now looked like a man who had just realized he had made a terrible mistake. Yes, he's here, the judge said quickly, his tone now filled with respect. Even fear. Glanced at Danielson. Back at the phone. Of course, sir, I understand. Another pause. No, that won't be necessary. I'll handle it immediately. He hung up slowly, his hand slightly shaken. Silence in the room was deafening. Diverian. Wait, what just happened? Edwo was on the other end of that. Calduchalet cleared his throat, adjusting his robe, trying to regain his composure. It was too late. Power dynamic had shifted completely. Looked directly at Daniel, this time not with arrogance, but with something else. Respect, Mr. Reyes, he said carefully. It appears there has been a misunderstanding. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Prosecutor's confident expression vanished instantly. Your Honor, what is going on? He demanded. Ignored him. All charges against Mr. Reyes are hereby dismissed, effective immediately. The room erupted. People whispered loudly. Some stood up, trying to understand what was happening. Prosecutor protested. You can't just dismiss the case. Without reviewing the evidence, Judge Hawley slammed his gavel. I said dismissed. His voice carried a weight it didn't have before, not arrogance. But Centennial closed his eyes for a moment as if a heavy burden had finally been lifted. But the story didn't end there because now everyone wanted answers. Judd looked at Daniel again. You should have told me who that was. Daniel shook his head slightly. You wouldn't have believed me. The judge exhaled slowly, then addressed the courtroom. For the record, the individual on that call was. He hesitated, most as if saying the name out loud would make it more real. The Chief Justice. The room fell silent. Again, shock spread across every facet. Chief Justice, highest authority in the entire judicial system, and he had personally answered a call for Daniel Reyes. Didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Prosecutor sat down. Speechless spectators exchanged confused glances. Daniel simply stood there quietly as if this outcome had always been inevitable. Later that day, outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Daniel, cameras flashing, microphones pushed toward him. How do you know? The Chief Justice? One of them, Escudinho, hesitated, then finally spoke. Years ago, before I was a mechanic, I worked as a clerk in a small legal office. The reporters leaned in closer. One night, there was a fire in the building. Everyone got out except one person. He was trapped inside, unconscious. Daniel paused. I went back in and pulled him out. Someone in the crowd whispered the Chief Justice. Daniel nodded. He never forgot. The story spread quickly across the city and beyond. Headlines captured the unbelievable momenta. Judge Humboldt, a case overturned, and a reminder that power doesn't always sit where people think it doesn't. For Judge Talehi was never quite the same. Against arrogance faded, replaced by something quieter, more thoughtful. Bess, he had learned something that a lesson no law book could teach, that sometimes the person standing silently in front of you isn't powerless. They're just waiting for the right moment. And sometimes all it took is one call. So the next time you think someone has no voice, no influence, no power, remember this story, because you never really know who's on the other end of the line.